Hello everyone, and welcome to a brand new theory and speculation video. Today, I want to talk about Perinheri, the newest book added to Genshin, and my thoughts on its lore. This book came out of the blue and gave us more information about Khaenri'ah, but it could also connect to Arlecchino, the Fatui general, and more. Now, this video does contain spoilers for the quests listed on screen now, so if you haven't done those, you have been warned. With all that said though, let's get right into the video. Before I get into the theories though, I want to go over the story given to us by this new book. This story starts in an ancient subterranean kingdom, specifically Khaenri'ah during the Crimson Moon dynasty. As the name of the dynasty implies, a crimson moon shone down during this time, not the dark sun of the Eclipse dynasty. Now, due to Khaenri'ah's position in the world, things from beyond Teyvat would sometimes leak in. Fortunately, the weapons and armies held by the kingdom were enough to defend the kingdom from any calamities. Still, some wondered what they would do if a child appeared from the so-called Ocean of Stars, which is very likely the Abyss. The kingdom believed that a child from beyond the stars could potentially transcend the gods and made preparations in case such a child appeared. This led to an orphanage being founded, and it was planned to be used to take care of a child from beyond. Later on though, it was expanded to accommodate orphans of the kingdom and those who wandered in. One of these children shared his name with this book, that of course being Perinheri. According to this book, his first memory was being asked by the grown-ups to crawl through a dark corridor. He did as he was told, crawling through the pitch-black darkness, stumbling along the way. Eventually, he reached the exit, though it had not been opened. On the other side of the door, the grown-ups coldly asked, "Are you dead?" He was confused by the question, but the grown-ups kept repeating it until he said, "Yes, I'm dead." They then frighteningly replied, "Did you see it then?" Upon hearing this question, Perinheri did end up seeing an illusion. As he gazed upon the crimson moon in the sky, it suddenly turned around, revealing itself to be a titanic, horrified eye. Then, the adults opened the door for Perinheri and told him that he had traversed the fire of two worlds within the hearth, and that he was now reborn. Now, according to this book, despite the kingdom's preparations, the person from beyond never arrived. Still, the orphanage housed plenty of unusual individuals, including Perinheri. Perinheri also had a best friend in the orphanage named Heliobrant, but soon their friendship would be tested. One day, a beautiful young lady claiming to be a noble princess would be welcomed into the orphanage. Apparently, her nation had been defeated by Deus Ori, but as a princess, she did not submit to the new god, and ended up wandering into Khaenri'ah. As for her name, she called herself Angelica, meaning one who is as a divine emissary. Shortly after her arrival, she declared that she would only marry the mightiest knight in all of the kingdom. Perinheri couldn't care less about that, but Heliobrant was absolutely smitten with her. Angelica and Heliobrant would often take many walks together near the Sea of Wells, where she would tell him much about the outside world. Out of concern for his best friend, a suspicious Perinheri would often come along. Over time, Heliobrant would start to change, and he constantly looked for trouble. He wished to constantly impress Angelica by showing off his prowess, but she only ever gave him a cool smile in return. During this time, Angelica would often speak of many other legendary figures from Khaenri'ah, implying they were mightier than Heliobrant. These figures included Njord, who walked with dark sprites, Alf, the greatest warrior in the Universitas Magistrorum, Alberic, commander of half the knights, and Perinheri, the undefeated. A few quick side notes here. Dark sprites are likely an early version of Rift Wolves, who fought alongside Beastmaster Knights. The Universitas Magistrorum was an organization where members practiced alchemy, astrology, and more. And finally, Alberic may very well be the namesake of the Alberic clan, which Kaya is a descendant of. Getting back on track though, Heliobrant was head over heels in love, and concluded that he needed to become mightier than Perinheri. Of course, he didn't want to hurt his friend, but the love he held began to drive him mad. On the other hand, Perinheri believed that he could cure Haleobrandt's madness by killing Angelica. Soon, the three engaged in a merciless pursuit, a battle which eventually led them to leaving Khaenri'ah's borders. As they crossed the border, Haleobrandt clutched his face, and the words he spoke became more like the noises of a wild beast. Angelica, now described as a witch, then explained why this was happening. Haleobrandt is the descendant of those who forsook their god and came to the kingdom. This is why the kingdom's ostensibly pure-blooded aristocracy persists. This is the price of betraying your own god. From what I can tell, Haleobrandt may have turned into a hilichurl or something similar, as according to the manga, they did exist before the Cataclysm. On the other hand, Perinheri was not affected in the same way as Haleobrandt, so Angelica explained why once again. As for you, Perinheri, you are one who drifted there, thus you bear no such curse. You may not have the nobility to shoulder a world, but you too have your own destiny. She then went on to explain why she wasn't affected by the curse either. And as for me, I betrayed no one, not for a moment, until my god died, so I too bear this curse not. But you now see who I truly am, yes? As she spoke, the sun rose over the horizon. Exhausted from the night-long battle, Perinheri looked upon the sun for the very first time. He then glanced back at Angelica, but did not see her as a beautiful woman from Liyue, nor a witch. I am freedom, that which has broken free of fate. This is what Haleobrandt sought in agony, but that which is now yours for the taking. Angelica was no longer there, and all that was in front of Perinheri was vast, empty land. Now, with the story told, let's move on to the theories. First up, who exactly were Perinheri and Angelica? Starting with Perinheri, why exactly was he not affected the same way Haleobrandt was affected by the outside world? As I stated earlier, Angelica says that he drifted there, referring to Khaenri'ah. However, we aren't told where Perinheri originally came from. So, what if instead of coming from somewhere in Teyvat, he came from beyond the stars? If that's the case, would that make Perinheri a descender? Well, not exactly, as Angelica said that he may not have the nobility to shoulder a world. Now, every descender is an outlander, but not all outlanders are descenders. A descender must possess a will that can rival an entire world. So, Perinheri could be an outlander, but not a descender. For a moment though, let's say that he was a descender, and that he just didn't appear to be one when he arrived due to his young age. As the book states, his first memory was in Khaenri'ah, so he may not even remember that he came from beyond the stars or what he's capable of. Interestingly, the timeline of this story seems to be during the Archon War, given how Angelica's nation was defeated by Dus Ori before she came to Khaenri'ah. We don't know exactly when during the Archon War this took place, but if it was early on, Perinheri could have been the third descender. As we learned in Fontaine's Archon quests, the Gnosis were made from the remains of the third descender, and they were of course given to the gods who won the Archon War. Perhaps the destiny that Angelica mentioned was that Perinheri would be killed to create the Gnosis. However, I don't think this would be the end of the third descender's story. Before I talk about that though, I want to talk more about Angelica. As I said earlier, her name means one who is as a divine emissary. Using this name, I thought that she could have come from Celestia, or at least acted upon their will. If so, getting Haleobrandt to fall for her may have been part of her plan. If she knew the third descender was in Khaenri'ah, she may have wanted to find a way to get him to the surface and in view of Celestia. Alternatively, her initial story may have been true, but upon realizing who Perinheri was, her motives could have changed. Her plan would have been the same as before, finding out how to get Perinheri to the surface. When she disappeared at the end, she could have ascended to Celestia as a reward for bringing them a descender. So, how would all of this connect to the Fatui? Well, before I get into the Fatui as a whole, I want to discuss potential connections with Arlecchino. Right now, we don't know much about Arlecchino, but I still want to go over my thoughts. Perhaps I'll revisit this theory after she releases in version 4.6. Anyways, her official announcement as a playable character gave her the title of Dire Balemoon, which I believe could connect back to the Crimson Moon of Khaenri'ah. Additionally, the whole theme of an orphanage and Perinheri crawling through a hearth instantly reminded me of the House of the Hearth, an orphanage run by Arlecchino. In the past, Arlecchino could have lived at this orphanage herself. Perhaps she could have gained a connection with the Crimson Moon of Khaenri'ah, tying back to her title. This could potentially explain her similarities to Caterpillar, an intelligent hilichurl who is able to appear in a human form. She may have been cursed like the others from Khaenri'ah, but thanks to her connection with the Crimson Moon, she was able to control her form. However, all of this would mean that she would have to be from Khaenri'ah, and she said that she was born in Fontaine. Still, this may not be the full truth. Instead, she could be telling a half-truth, saying that only her current persona was born in Fontaine, but she lived long before that. Alternatively, she could have still been born in Fontaine, but somehow made her way down to Khaenri'ah at one point or another. Moving on from Arlecchino though, let's talk about the rest of the Fatui. To start, I want to focus on the title of the book. I don't mean Perinheri, I mean the alternate title, Heleobranto Innamorato. When I saw the word Innamorato, I immediately thought of the Innamorati. For those of you who don't know, the Innamorati are also known as the Lovers, and are stock characters from the Commedia dell'arte. Of course, the Commedia dell'arte is where the titles of all the Fatui Harbingers come from. So, what if the origins of the Fatui lay within this story as well? Perhaps in the past, the Tsaritsa could have been a divine emissary, with a role similar to Angelica. She would spread love to everyone around her, but she would be forced to use it against people. After witnessing the cataclysm, she could have seen it as all too much, closing her heart off from the rest of the world. She became a god with no more love, and went on to form the Fatui. In her mind though, having no love left may have been a good thing, as she would no longer be able to trick or hurt people with it. Alternatively, what if the Tsaritsa and Angelica were the very same person? In the story, Angelica desired the Mightiest Knight in Khaenri'ah, which was very likely Perinheri. As such, she may have loved Perinheri, but because of her duties as a divine emissary, they couldn't be together. After the ending of the book, centuries would pass and the two wouldn't see each other. At some point, Angelica would become the Tsaritsa, the cryo-archon of Snezhnaya. Long before this though, Perinheri could have been killed to make the Gnosis, which the Tsaritsa wouldn't learn of until the Cataclysm. Once she found out, she would immediately form the Fatui, as she couldn't forgive Celestia for killing Perinheri. Now, the Tsaritsa may have also become the cryo-archon during the Cataclysm itself. If this is the case, when she obtained the Cryognosis, she could have sensed that it was made from the remains of the third descender, Perinheri. She would then form the Fatui, with the goal of eventually uniting the 7 Gnosis to bring Perinheri back. After all, in the Commedia dell'arte, the lovers are always reunited by the end of the story. Now, all of this could also connect back to the Seelie, and the disaster that turned them into the husks that we see today. Perhaps the Seelie ancestor and traveler from afar that married each other were none other than Angelica and Perinheri. Their marriage would have been witnessed by the 3 Moon Sisters, but their happiness wouldn't last. A month after they married, the disaster began, which eventually led to them being separated and having their memories wiped. If Angelica is the Tsaritsa, her obtaining the Cryognosis could have awoken these memories, as the Gnosis would have been made from the remains of Perinheri. Her plan would still be the same, but I still want to talk about the potential Seelie connections. All of these connections may be a bit much, but it's still fun to talk about them. Anyways, that's pretty much it for my thoughts on Perinheri and the new lore it brought us. All of this lore was super interesting, and I can't wait to learn more about it in the future, perhaps when Arlecchino releases. If you want to hear more of my thoughts on topics I mentioned in this video, I recommend my video on Arlecchino and my thoughts about her. I would love to hear what ideas you all have for Perinheri in the comments below as well. Anyways, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Sources and further readings are also in the description if you want to check them out. I hope you all have an amazing day, and I'll see you all in the next video.